unsinkable before its first voyage even began. 4 days later, the Atlantic would become a floating graveyard. Titanic represented the peak of industrial confidence and human ambition. Thousands of workers spent years constructing the enormous ocean liner. Nothing this large had ever moved across water before Titanic. Wealthy passengers compared the ship to an enormous floating palace. Far below, immigrant families slept beside humming steel walls. In April 1912, Titanic departed toward New York City. Titanic departed Southampton on April 10, 1912. Crowds stopped speaking when the enormous ship appeared. Titanic was the largest moving object ever constructed. Many families carried their entire lives inside small suitcases. First-class passengers experienced unmatched luxury aboard Titanic. Deep below, exhausted workers shoveled coal without stopping. Newspapers described Titanic as practically unsinkable. Some sailors privately distrusted claims about absolute safety. Wireless operators transmitted messages almost continuously. Children played across polished decks beneath cold Atlantic sunlight. Titanic maintained high speed despite growing iceberg warnings. The captain appeared relaxed during evening dinner conversations. The ocean became unusually calm during the final evening. Without waves, icebergs became almost invisible at night. Several nearby ships transmitted urgent iceberg warnings. Passenger messages overwhelmed the exhausted wireless operators.
2 lookouts scanned darkness without binoculars. The air felt painfully cold across the upper decks. Suddenly, a dark shape emerged directly ahead. The warning bell rang 3 sharp times. Officers ordered an immediate turn away from the iceberg. Titanic began turning only seconds before collision. Passengers heard a strange scraping beneath their feet. Many passengers barely felt the impact at all. The iceberg ripped open multiple compartments below waterline. Engineers immediately saw freezing seawater flooding inward. Massive watertight doors sealed sections of the ship. Too many compartments had already been breached. Titanic could survive flooding in only 4 compartments. The iceberg damaged at least 5 separate compartments. The ship's designer quietly understood the truth immediately. Titanic would sink within only a few hours.
Inside the lounges, conversations continued almost normally. Some passengers continued playing cards beside warm fireplaces. The orchestra received instructions to keep people calm. Stewards quietly guided passengers toward the upper decks. Many passengers refused wearing heavy winter clothing outside. The freezing temperature became immediately unbearable above deck. Titanic carried far fewer lifeboats than necessary. Shockingly, the ship still satisfied outdated maritime regulations. Early lifeboats departed only partially filled. Some passengers refused leaving the brightly lit ship. Third-class passengers struggled navigating unfamiliar corridors. Many immigrants understood almost none of the shouted instructions. Wireless operators transmitted desperate distress calls across the Atlantic. Titanic used both CQD and the newer SOS signals. One nearby ship never responded to Titanic's distress calls. Its wireless operator had already gone to sleep.
Water slowly climbed through lower corridors and staircases. Passengers finally noticed the ship beginning to tilt. Officers officially ordered passengers into the lifeboats. Women and children received boarding priority across most lifeboats. Husbands kissed families goodbye beside freezing railings. Many men silently stepped backward after helping loved ones. Lower decks became increasingly crowded and chaotic. Stories later emerged about locked barriers below deck. The musicians continued playing even as panic spread. Above them, the stars looked impossibly bright. Some passengers believed nearby lights meant rescue was close. The nearest rescue ship remained dangerously far away. The ship's bow sank deeper into freezing black Atlantic waters. Crew members struggled lowering lifeboats across sharply tilting decks. Passengers slipped across icy wood beneath growing panic and confusion. Some people still believed rescue ships would arrive within minutes. Distress rockets exploded brightly above the silent ocean horizon. Nearby witnesses later misunderstood the rockets as harmless celebrations. Titanic's wireless room transmitted desperate coordinates without stopping. The operators knew electrical power could fail at any moment.
Water already flooded sections only meters beneath their feet. Engineers continued working below despite understanding their survival chances. Most engine workers never escaped the sinking ship alive. Freezing seawater reached deeper corridors with terrifying speed. Lifeboats disappeared slowly into darkness beyond the collapsing liner. Families shouted final promises across widening black stretches of water. Some passengers simply stood silently beside the railings, waiting. Others returned inside, searching for warmth one final time. The angle of Titanic became impossible to ignore anymore. Loose furniture and machinery crashed violently through interior hallways. Officers fired warning shots while controlling overcrowded lifeboat areas. Desperate passengers suddenly rushed forward as remaining spaces disappeared. The orchestra continued performing through the rising noise and screams. Witnesses later remembered hearing calm music above terrible chaos. Titanic's stern slowly lifted higher above the freezing Atlantic. Exposed propellers emerged completely from the dark ocean surface. Many survivors described the moment as strangely unreal and silent. Interior lights flickered repeatedly throughout the dying ship. Steam pressure released violently through enormous funnels into night skies. Some passengers jumped directly into the freezing ocean below. Water temperature remained cold enough to kill within minutes. Children cried beside lifeboats drifting farther from illuminated decks. Survivors later remembered hearing prayers spoken in many languages. Titanic's enormous structure groaned loudly beneath unbearable internal pressure. Suddenly, the ship's lights failed across every remaining deck.
Darkness swallowed the Atlantic almost instantly after the blackout. Thousands of voices screamed simultaneously beneath the freezing night sky. Titanic finally broke apart under catastrophic structural stress. The bow disappeared first beneath black, freezing seawater. The remaining stern rose almost vertically above terrified survivors. People clung desperately to railings as gravity pulled downward. Then, the stern vanished completely beneath the Atlantic surface. An unnatural silence followed immediately after Titanic disappeared forever. Minutes later, desperate screams echoed across freezing dark waters. Survivors inside lifeboats listened helplessly to voices fading slowly away. Many later described those sounds as permanently unforgettable. Most victims died from hypothermia within less than 20 minutes. The freezing Atlantic became a vast field of floating bodies. Icebergs drifted silently nearby, beneath brilliant, untouched stars. Far away, one ship finally raced toward Titanic's last coordinates. RMS Carpathia pushed dangerously fast through ice-filled waters overnight.
Its captain understood survivors possessed only limited remaining time. Lifeboats floated scattered across endless darkness until early morning. Survivors watched sunrise slowly reveal frozen debris across the ocean. Personal belongings drifted silently between floating pieces of wreckage. Some survivors searched hopelessly for relatives among distant lifeboats. Carpathia finally arrived nearly 2 hours after Titanic disappeared. Exhausted survivors cried openly while boarding the rescue ship. Many lifeboats arrived carrying empty seats beside grieving families. Survivors struggled understanding how such disaster became possible. More than 1,500 people died during Titanic's sinking.
only around 700 survived the freezing Atlantic disaster. Newspapers worldwide transformed Titanic into an immediate global tragedy. Investigations quickly exposed deadly mistakes hidden beneath Titanic's luxury. Investigators discovered ignored iceberg warnings throughout the voyage records. Safety regulations had not evolved alongside rapidly growing ship sizes. Titanic legally carried lifeboats for barely half its passengers. Company executives defended decisions during tense public investigations afterward. Witness testimony sometimes contradicted each other during emotional questioning.
Survivors described confusion, darkness, and overwhelming freezing temperatures repeatedly. Many children survived, while fathers remained aboard the sinking liner. Some wealthy passengers died, while unknown immigrants survived unexpectedly. The disaster permanently changed international maritime safety regulations. Lifeboat requirements increased dramatically after Titanic's shocked governments. Continuous 24-hour radio monitoring later became mandatory at sea. Ice patrol systems also began protecting dangerous North Atlantic routes. Yet thousands of bodies were never recovered from freezing waters. The Atlantic slowly erased visible evidence of the catastrophe.
Decades passed before explorers located Titanic's hidden resting place. The wreck remained undiscovered nearly 4 kilometers beneath the surface. Titanic rested silently within complete darkness for over 70 years. In 1985, researchers finally discovered the broken wreckage. Rust-covered railings still resembled photographs from Titanic's final voyage. Personal shoes remained scattered across the ocean floor without owners. The wreck became a frozen graveyard, preserved beneath crushing pressure. Cameras revealed enormous damage across the shattered forward compartments. Scientists confirmed Titanic split apart before fully sinking underwater. Bacteria slowly consumed the remaining steel structure every passing year. Today, large sections of Titanic continue collapsing into the seabed. Future generations may eventually lose the wreck forever beneath darkness. Still, Titanic continues fascinating millions more than a century later. Books, documentaries, museums, and films repeatedly revisit the disaster. The tragedy combines technology, class, ambition,
Fear and human error. People still debate whether Titanic's sinking could have been prevented. Some historians blame excessive speed through dangerous iceberg conditions. Others criticize lifeboat shortages and outdated evacuation procedures. Many passengers never received equal survival opportunities during the chaos. Third-class families suffered especially devastating losses that night. Communication failures also worsened the scale of the catastrophe dramatically.
Nearby ships misunderstood signals or simply reacted too slowly. Minutes repeatedly separated survival from freezing death across the Atlantic. Survivors carried emotional scars for the remainder of their lives. Some refused discussing Titanic publicly ever again afterward. Others relived the screams and darkness inside recurring nightmares. Focusing on Titanic's story because human mistakes remain painfully timeless. Confidence often blinds societies moments before catastrophic failure arrives. Titanic symbolized absolute certainty moments before complete helplessness emerged. Contemplating that the disaster exposed how fragile technological pride could truly become. Focusing on wealth, luxury, and engineering brilliance failed against freezing nature. Yet, courage and sacrifice also appeared during humanity's darkest hours.
Musicians continued playing while knowing escape had become impossible. Engineers remained below, sustaining power while death approached rapidly. Parents surrendered lifeboat seats, protecting frightened children beside them. Countless ordinary people displayed extraordinary courage during Titanic's final hours.
The Atlantic eventually returned to complete silence after sunrise arrived. But history never truly allowed Titanic to disappear completely. Every generation rediscovers the tragedy through new images and stories. The wreck still attracts explorers, descending into crushing underwater darkness. Advanced submarines continue documenting Titanic's slow deterioration beneath the ocean. Each expedition captures haunting reminders of interrupted human lives. Broken dishes and abandoned shoes remain untouched across the seabed. Time continues destroying evidence once considered impossible to erase forever. Eventually, Titanic itself may completely vanish beneath biological corrosion. Only stories, recordings, and memories will survive after the wreck disappears. Yet perhaps that was always Titanic's true final destination. Not the ocean floor, but permanent space within human memory. More than a ship sank during April 1912. An era of unquestioned industrial confidence also disappeared beneath the Atlantic. Titanic changed maritime law, emergency planning, and global safety standards forever. Its lessons continue influencing modern ships crossing dangerous oceans today. 1977. Families still search historical records, discovering lost relatives aboard Titanic. Museums preserve recovered objects connected to real human passengers and crew. Every artifact represents interrupted futures, frozen by one terrible night. Titanic remains history's most famous reminder of human vulnerability. Tonight, the Atlantic above Titanic appears calm and empty again. Beneath those waters, the wreck slowly dissolves into darkness forever. Yet the names and stories continue surviving far beyond the ship. People remember Titanic because its tragedy still feels deeply human. Fear, hope, arrogance, sacrifice, and love filled those final hours. Entire families vanished, while others survived, carrying lifelong survivor's guilt. The disaster revealed both humanity's brilliance and devastating imperfections simultaneously.
One iceberg shattered the illusion of complete technological control forever. Titanic's passengers believed modern engineering had conquered nature permanently. The Atlantic proved otherwise within less than 3 terrifying hours. Even now, the ocean keeps most secrets from that night hidden. New discoveries continue emerging from archives, artifacts, and underwater expeditions. Historians still debate decisions made during Titanic's final critical moments. But certain truths remain painfully clear more than a century later. Pride ignored warnings while freezing darkness approached silently ahead. Small mistakes combined slowly until escape became completely impossible. Thousands entered the Atlantic believing rescue would arrive soon enough. For most passengers, help came far too late. Titanic disappeared beneath freezing waters at approximately 2:20 in the morning. Less than 3 hours transformed celebration into unimaginable catastrophe forever. The wreck still rests below, surrounded by silence and eternal darkness. Yet Titanic's final voyage continues traveling endlessly through human history. We study the disaster
searching for meaning inside overwhelming tragedy. Perhaps people also search for reflections of themselves within Titanic's story. Ambition, denial, courage, panic, sacrifice, and hope existed aboard that ship. Those emotions remain unchanged despite the passing of more than centuries. Titanic reminds humanity how quickly certainty can collapse into chaos. And somewhere below, the Atlantic keeps the rest forever silent.